everybody, and welcome. What you're looking at is a picture of the world turtle, as it's kind of come to be known, but there's a similar representation of this image in various cultures, but I'm going to try to draw a metaphor from this into a lot of things, this being sort of the cosmic egg, and the tortoise being a torus field, and the elephants being the four elements, and surrounding the egg is the snake, the serpent, also the sine wave, the sin of Eve. And yeah, this is your introduction to the syncretism of the world turtle, and I should give a shout out right away to Mr. Santos Bonacci of Mr. Astro Theology on YouTube. I have absorbed an incredible amount of hours of his work and gained an incredible amount of insight due to that time spent absorbing his information, and I couldn't recommend it more that you do the same for infinite reasons. But yeah, this is sort of the story of the allegories of how all of ancient theologies and all of science and all of the mythologies, the fairy tales, the nursery rhymes, they're all sort of derivative of kind of what you're looking at. This is it's symbolic, it's metaphor, it's allegory. But as we get into this, you'll start seeing that that's kind of the most effective way to communicate kind of complex concepts and ideas. And yeah, it's kind of all been in code, and it's not really been hidden from us either. Once you start looking into this, you'll start seeing that there's a code to the language of this metaphor. As you can tell, there's phonetics involved, and elephants, elements, tortoise, torus field. There's a code in the language that unravels a whole beautiful mystery. And as many things get answered as questions pop up. So this isn't a journey to, enlightenment, as I've come to sort of understand, is a destructive process. And what remains is yet to, is our own journey to sort of decipher, as far as I'm concerned. But there's plenty of mysteries left, but there's a code to sort of unraveling some of the more material mysteries, and we're going to connect things to the transcendental world that our modern education hasn't provided for us an opportunity to look at in a way other than the strictly Aristotelian, atomistic, materialistic concept of looking at the world. The deeper we get into this, we're going to be making the argument that there are no particles, and it's kind of the core of what's going on with modern science and quantum mechanics. They're trying to quantify things, but everything is just it's just fields, and we'll get into sort of understanding that. But the idea of a particle is a misdirection, and we miss the core spiritual nature of what's really happening there. And that's very much involved in that tortoise that you're looking at, and that's why it's such an important concept all around the world, and why you'll find that languages all around the world are much more similar than they appear once you understand the syncretic nature and how it's all tying to astrology and all of the other metaphysical aspects of nature and reality. Um, it's really it goes back to electricity and magnetism. And in this black and white image of the yin yang, black is the representation of dielectricity in this image, and white is the magnetism, divine magnetism, spiritual. This is the spiritual realm of causation, and when magnetism acts upon dielectricity, they have a child called electricity, and that is represented by the blue and the red yin yang, and that is the material world of effects that we experience. And the blue and the red represent the blue shifting and the red shifting of the light spectrum, and the red represents you know electricity. Even on this sort of physical realm is electromagnetic, so the red represents the physical electric, and the blue represents the physical magnetic within the electromagnetic spectrum that we experience on Earth. And that gets us into the work of Ken Wheeler, and this image is the image of a magnet underneath a thing called an invention called a ferrocell, Ferrocell. I would recommend looking into those. But on Ken Wheeler's YouTube channel, Theoria Apophasis, you can look up his work with the ferrocell, magnetism, dielectricity, light, field theory. Ken Wheeler is a brilliant individual. And he's got all these, you can see these images in video form where he can kind of move the magnet around underneath the ferrocell, and you can see those magnetic lines kind of morphing around in reaction. But the ferrocell it's two thin sheets of glass with a 1 micron thin layer of this ferrofluid, an iron-based fluid, that allows you to sort of see this. According to Ken Wheeler, you can see in person, you can see 4 inches of holographic depth. But you can see a lot of it just in the images. And, getting into really analyzing what's happening with these images is getting into the heart of looking into that snake wrapped around the world turtle, and the world turtle sort of being the egg, and looking at things in that light. And now, those 2 black holes at the top and the bottom are what we would consider the poles of the magnet. It's just field pressure mediation more than what we conceive of as a pole. But what I really want to kind of look at is that black line down the center, and that is the dielectric plane, and that's the center of that whole thing is the point of inertia within the field of that magnet. That magnet has a cohesive field which allows it to attract and repel certain things, specifically iron-based things, which is why those 2 black holes, going forward in these other images, they look like they're facing up and at the camera lens, I guess, but they're being attracted to that ferrofluid, so it's sort of the window into being able to see it is also affecting what you're looking at a little bit. But as we get into looking at these other images, you'll be able to see that it looks more like the Torus that you expect to see. It's hard to... this invention's just like a decade old, if that, and we're pretty fortunate to be able to see what we can see. Not long before, you couldn't have this beautiful vision into what's really happening in nature. We're truly living in amazing times, people. But what you can see here, this is the serpent wrapped around the egg. All those magnetic ley lines, those are little snakes creating zodiacs around the egg. But I want to get back to this picture for a second, and specifically that kind of dark line through the middle, across the center. That would be the dielectric plane of inertia. And that's really where the mystery of all of science is. That's what gets, there's a spiritual pulse in the middle of that, just like a heartbeat. And the sun also has a pulse. There's a pulse to this universe, and it's a magnetic pulse which creates instantaneous action at a distance. And it's something that science has yet to wrap its mind around or even consider. And everywhere where that pulse is where science mistakes a particle. And that's really the core of understanding all of this. Everything else can get thrown away. You can let your imagination run wild with understanding that. But in the context of a torus field, you know, and then going back to the world turtle, the tortoise. The Torus in astrology is fixed earth. We live on the fixed earth plane of a torus field. And that black dielectric plane that you see, that's the dielectric plane of inertia. That's the flat earth you live on. It's a dielectric condensate. And cultures all around the world understood exactly what was going on with this. They didn't maybe necessarily understand the dielectricity and the electromagnetic nature of everything, but they understood that they lived on a flat plane, which we would too had we not been trained to stop believing our eyes and the way we perceive reality. We sort of have gotten tricked by the overlords of science into cutting our own heads off and our own ability to observe the world, and just allow the institutions to decide exactly what is and what isn't reality. And we really we suffer a lot for having allowed that to happen to us. And it's nobody's fault other than the people who tell the lies. But breaking away from all of the lies and all of that, the idea of talking about the world turtle as a symbol and a metaphor, part of that is to talk about the flat earth. It's a very important part of that, understanding torus fields and understanding that dielectric inertial plane within every torus field, including the one in our body. The heart chakra is that center of our torus field. The earth is an anagram for heart, which is an anagram for ether, and all of those represent that center dielectric inertial point where there's a perturbation. It's a magnetic pulse which creates a perturbation in a field, which creates the sine wave, which creates time and space and the world that we live in. And to go back to the elephants as the elements, and to really tie this all back into the astrology of it, because that sine wave that's life happens along that sine wave, and there are elements along that sine wave, and we each are sort of we go through the crucible of time, and we are exposed to all of the elements along that sine wave, and it's what helps create our own personal evolutions. And what, we're forged in the fire, and we're forged in the air, and we're forged in the earth, and we're forged in the water. And that's, part of what that whole world turtle being such an important thing, because it's really reflective of our outer and inner world. And I really enjoy the syncretic nature of that symbol. So thanks for sticking with me. Peace and love to everybody, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks.